Do the Chiefs really miss offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, or are there other factors at play that would be too great for even EB to help with if he was still here? Well, that's the question I attempt to answer in today's video, because the Chiefs offense has notably regressed this season compared to last, and many are saying the main reason why is because of Bieniemy's absence. So let's talk about that. The Chiefs controlling their own destiny as the 1 seed in the AFC, along with Andy Reid's answer to Kadarius Toney's recent lack of usage, which has been questionable. But first, how about those? Well, this past weekend was a glorious weekend for Chiefs Kingdom, as almost every team that we needed to see lose did indeed lose, and this keeps the Chiefs at the top of the AFC West, yes, but also still atop the entire AFC. Heading into this past week, the Chiefs were the 1 seed at 7-2, holding the tiebreaker over the Ravens, who had the same record but more losses within the conference, and below them, the Jags were 6-2 and coming off a 5-game win streak. The Bengals were catching steam after winning 4 in a row, and some even thought the Chargers could be a team to watch as they rattled off a couple wins in a row, but we know what happens with LA every single year. The Chargers are going to freaking Charger. So while Travis Kelce was enjoying his time in Argentina and Patrick Mahomes was watching his alma mater take down Kansas, all these other teams proceeded to piss down their legs. The Jags got absolutely steamrolled by the 49ers 34-3. Tyler Boyd forgot how to catch passes and allowed the Texans to get the win over Cincy, though CJ Stroud is a dog, I might add. The Ravens were throwing pick sixes to the Browns, who I thought would make a climb, but Deshaun Watson is out for the season due to a shoulder surgery that is needed. The Chargers could do nothing to stop Goff and the Lions, and then, believe it or not, the Ravens, Bengals, and Chargers hilariously all lost on last-second field goals, as did the Bills on Monday Night Football in a very wild ending against the Broncos, which probably deserves its own video on how poorly that game was played by both teams. And with that, the AFC West looks as follows. The Chiefs are 7-2. The Raiders, who did get the dub over the Jets, are second, believe it or not, at 5-5, with the Chargers and Broncos both being 4-5, but the Broncos have the most losses within the division. Then for the AFC, the Dolphins lead the East at 6-3, the Ravens lead the North at 7-3, and the Bengals are 4th in their division, just FYI, at 5-4. Then the Jags are heading up the South at 6-3, with the Texans, who are playing well, right behind them at 5-4. And with that being said, the Chiefs basically control their own destiny at the moment in the AFC. They need to beat the Eagles, which is no easy task, as the Eagles are rolling and are number 1 on most power rankings, with the Chiefs being listed as number 2. Then KC plays the Raiders, Packers, Bills, Patriots, Raiders again, Bengals, and finally the Chargers. There's obviously a lot of tough games left to play, and the Chiefs got to get it done, especially on the offensive side of the ball, as the defense has been carrying the team, per the words of Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, and basically everybody else. The Chiefs defense is tied for 3rd in sacks with 31, have allowed the 4th fewest total yards, the 5th fewest passing yards, and are tied for 2nd with the 49ers in points allowed, only allowing 15.9 points per game on average. So yeah, the defense is carrying, especially considering the Chiefs offense is 13th in points per game, 8th in total yards per game, and 13th in scoring touchdowns in the red zone, though they are 5th in passing yards and 4th in 3rd down conversions. And from here, I want to process through Andy Reid's answer of Kadarius Toney's lack of usage, which was interesting, and then try to answer the question of how much do the Chiefs really miss Eric Bieniemy, and the results of that may be a bit of a surprise. But first, when it comes to food, me and my family are huge on protein as the main source of every meal, and that's why the sponsor of today's video, Good Chop, is something we are massive fans of. They deliver customizable boxes full of seafood, beef, chicken, and or pork products that is sourced from American farms and fisheries right to your front door. And this helps keep the food fresh and allows you to skip the lines at the grocery store while still being able to trust that the quality of cuts coming your way is top-notch. And yes, you heard that right. Good Chop sources its meat and seafood from local family farms and independent ranchers here in the US. On top of that, their beef comes with no antibiotics or added hormones ever, and with over 60 plus high quality cuts to choose from, there's definitely something for everyone. Whether it's 100% grass-fed ribeyes, flavorful T-bones, wild-caught salmon, thick-cut bacon, even free-range and organic chicken breasts, the list is long and again, fully customizable to suit your preferences. We loved Good Chop so much the first go-around last month, and this month was no exception. The steak was a fantastic dinner, and the marbling, chef's kiss. The pork chops were so good that even my youngest was coming back for seconds, which is pretty rare. The boneless, skinless chicken breasts obviously were fantastic for a dinner as well, and our daughters, per usual, loved the thick cut bacon. Basically, everything they sent was absolutely fantastic. On top of that, Good Chop believes in their quality so much that they offer a 100% money back guarantee. Therefore, love Good Chop or get your money back. And to get your box of customized high quality American meat and seafood, go to goodchop.com/YouTube and use code HBTC120 or click the link in the description down below to get $120 off across your first 4 boxes today. Again, just go to goodchop.com/YouTube and use code HBTC120 to get $120 off across your first 4 boxes. All right, Andy Reid spoke with the media Monday and said he thinks the team is doing a good job with the run game, the passing game for the most part, and the percentages of pass plays versus run plays are pretty similar to how they normally go about things. However, he then said, quote, "We've got to eliminate the penalties. That's the main thing. If we can take care of that, we'll be fine." So, the offense's dip in production, which I mentioned last week, has definitely been stifled by penalties. The Chiefs are top 10 in penalties called, and then Andy also touched on needing to clean up drops and finish these catches strong. And yeah, the Chiefs lead the league in dropped passes. So, if you can clean up the drops and the penalties, that should help out with a lot of the offensive stagnation at times this season. Andy mentioned that the young guys are getting better every week, which is a plus, though there is still plenty to work on. Andy was also asked about Kadarius Toney and his lack of overall usage these past few games, which is something I've touched on pretty extensively on the channel because it's honestly a situation that is confusing as hell to me. And Andy's response was that they want to keep it coming with Toney, though he quickly reminded everyone that Kadarius did have that knee surgery just prior to the season, so they are taking it easy with him up to this point, making sure he can make it through the year in good health. Andy admitted that Toney could definitely be used more than the 7 snaps he played in during the Dolphins game, and that more usage should still be okay for Toney and his body. Quote, "We just got to keep an eye on his leg and make sure they are repping that out the right way and let him keep progressing throughout the year." So some people took Andy Reid at face value with that answer and said, see, they are indeed saving him for the second half of the season as well as the playoffs, making sure he stays healthy to unleash this weapon down the stretch. However, some were not so sure about that answer, only because it's typical of Andy Reid to take the high road when speaking about players and not throwing them under the bus publicly. Carrington Harrison of 610 Sports responded to that idea and said, "I think it's obvious Toney's fallen out of the rotation. He has 3 targets in the last 3 games and played just 7 snaps in Germany against the Dolphins." And that is an angle I've definitely thrown out there as well because Toney's snaps by week looks as follows. 16 against the Lions. That was a bad game by him. We know they rushed him out there. I get it. 19 against the Jags. He then hurt his toe and played just 2 snaps in the blowout win over the Bears, but bounced back a bit in week 4, playing 17 snaps. He then saw a rise over the next 2 weeks, playing 25 snaps against the Vikings, then a season high 30 snaps against Denver in week 6. However, this is where it gets weird because the last 3 weeks have seen a dramatic decline with him playing just 32 snaps total over the last 3 games, which is basically the amount of snaps he saw total in 1 game during week 6. And he's also notably been passed up by Mecole Hardman, who's only played for the Chiefs the past 3 weeks, at least of this season, since trading for him. So whether it's as Andy Reid says, just making sure Toney stays healthy, or something a bit more like he's fallen out of the rotation, I think the proof will be in the pudding of Toney's usage over the next few games. And regarding this upcoming Monday Night Football game, both teams are coming off a bye week, and after 31 years as an NFL coach, 24 of them as a head coach, Andy Reid, I believe, is 27-4 after a bye. So, can he make it 28-4? Well, I sure hope so. It'll be an intriguing matchup, to say the least, that I'm going to cover more in detail during Friday's video, but it's definitely a highly anticipated Super Bowl rematch, though, of course, this is just a regular season game. I'll tell you this much, though. Win or lose, the Eagles better not piss, whine, moan, complain, etc. for months after this game about the frickin' field conditions. All right, almost every week, I see multiple comments on my videos and nearly every social media platform that basically insinuates if Eric Bieniemy was still here in Kansas City, the offense wouldn't be having the issues that they are struggling through this year. And I've been seeing them so much that I finally sought out an attempt to see how much weight that really holds. Is one of the primary factors of the Chiefs' offensive struggles due to the fact that Eric Bieniemy is now no longer with the team? Well, this is a pretty complex question to try and answer, but first it may benefit some to see all of the offensive changes that took place from last year to this season for Kansas City, because There's quite a bit. First, the Chiefs have 2 new tackles that are noticeably not as good at run blocking, which was a well-known factor upon both Jawan Taylor and Donovan Smith getting signed. Then, a trusty veteran in Juju Smith-Schuster is now gone. He had about 1,000 yards for the team last year, and he built a solid and almost instantaneous rapport with Mahomes very quickly last year. Meanwhile, Rashee Rice is a rookie who is doing really well. He's going to hit about 750 yards or so this season if he keeps up his average, but it's taking more time with him than it did with Juju for obvious reasons. And yes, Eric Bieniemy is now gone, and Matt Nagy took his position, and that's where a lot of the blame seems to be squarely placed. But the Chiefs also lost their running backs coach in Greg Lewis, as he's now with the Ravens. The new running backs coach is Todd Pinkston, a former NFL wide receiver from what I can tell has never coached running backs prior. Then the Chiefs' former wide receiver coach Joe Blameyer is now the passing game coordinator, and the new wide receiver coach is Connor Embry, who has been with the Chiefs for 5 years, but spent 2 seasons as a defensive assistant, followed by 2 seasons as a quality control coach. For what it's worth, though, he was a high school wide receiver coach in 2018, but this is his first time doing that at the professional level. So yeah, Eric Bieniemy is gone, but the Chiefs now have a different running backs coach, passing game coordinator, wide receiver coach, and offensive coordinator all in one season. That is a lot of change and not as simple as just EB is gone and Nagy took his role. So blame Nagy. So now that you look at those changes, it's also worth noting that the Chiefs receivers lead the league in dropped passes. They are well within the top 10 in most penalties in the league, which is 15 more total at this point in the season for the Chiefs compared to last year, and already have 17 giveaways on the year, which is just 6 less than they had all last year. That's a big deal. So these factors definitely contribute to less overall production from the offense, which Andy Reid once again mentioned in his presser on Monday that the team just needs to clean up the drops and eliminate penalties, and he feels pretty good about where the offense is at overall, though of course he mentioned there's always going to be things they need to improve upon. Well, believe it or not, some are saying that if Eric Bieniemy was still here, there would simply be less drops, less penalties, and less overall mistakes like turnovers and wrong routes ran by receivers, because Bieniemy doesn't mess around and holds players accountable. And while he is great at that, it's a bit hard for me to personally fathom that EB being more harsh on players for their mistakes than, say, Matt Nagy would then automatically result in less overall drops, less overall penalties, and turnovers. It's a bit too complex of an issue to what if about regarding EB, though to be fair, maybe it would have helped a bit, but how much is basically impossible to quantify. Then some have said that if Eric Bieniemy was still in Kansas City, the Chiefs would be running the ball more. Well, what if I told you that the Chiefs actually run the ball more this year compared to last, albeit barely? The Chiefs currently call a pass play 60.9% of the time and a run play just 39.1% of the time, which is 27th in the NFL. Well, last year, they actually called a run play a bit less often, 38.52% of the time, which had them 25th last year. So the difference is roughly a half of 1%, which means the Chiefs still run and pass the ball at a very similar frequency. I've seen others say that the Chiefs would be better on third downs if EB was still there. Well, the Chiefs are currently 4th on third downs, converting 45.5% of the time, though it has fluctuated week to week. Just a couple weeks ago, they were 1st in the NFL converting on third downs. But yeah, last year, they were 2nd best by season's end on converting third downs, and it was around 48.9% of the time, I believe. So there is a 3% dip on third downs right now, which is pretty slight, but could definitely be affected by drops, penalties, and a lack of execution by players, not just the overall play calling from the coaches. And while I guess I see him in the camp of EB may not have made that big of a difference overall so far, until this point at least, the next couple of points is more of a compelling counter argument in favor of Eric Bieniemy. I don't have time to fully get into the weeds of every Washington Commanders stat from 2022 compared to 2023, but they are definitely better in the red zone with EB there, currently ranked 11th after being 24th last season. This is a huge difference of Washington scoring a touchdown in the red zone over 20% more often. Huge! Now, to harp on the EB would be encouraging Andy Reid to run the ball more this season narrative, I already said they don't do that. And it's also worth noting that in 2022, the Commanders were 12th in rushing yards per game, and this year they are actually 28th, but they have a much better passing game now thanks to Sam Howell. And for the record, last year they primarily started Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke, while this year, both of those guys are gone, and second year Sam Howell is now the starter. So there's definitely more consistency at the quarterback position, and Howell, to be fair, is playing great. He's 5th in passing yards per game, tied for 5th in touchdowns, but has been sacked 47 times, which leads the league by a landslide. Mahomes, by comparison, has only been sacked 10 times for what that is worth. Another positive for the Commanders, though, is they average 3 more points per game this year with 21.7, while last year they were scoring an average of 18.9, one of the worst in the league. This year, the Chiefs have dropped from 29.2 points per game in 2022, which was first in the NFL, to 23.1 points per game, which is roughly a 6-point per game drop. Though to be fair, they kneeled 2 games out at their opponent's 2-yard line, which would have raised that closer to 25 points per game or so, but still, that's a 4-point drop for KC, a 3-point rise for the Commanders, a noticeable difference for both teams when looking there. And from here, let's look at both teams' expected points added. I'll throw the definition up on the screen if you want to read it in more depth. Pause it, but we're just going to keep going here. The reason I want to look at EPA is because it also casts Eric Bieniemy in a rather positive light. If you look at the Chiefs' EPA stats in 2022 compared to 2023, they've basically dropped in every single category this season. Meanwhile, the Commanders have elevated in almost every single EPA stat from 2022 to 2023, and since Eric Bieniemy does indeed, from what I understand, run the offense over there, that's a win for Bieniemy and shows he is making a difference. The drop in KC's stats across the board is complex based on everything we've talked about prior in this segment, but I do think it's hard to say at this point that EB leaving didn't play somewhat of a role in the Chiefs dipping in every single EPA category. So yeah, while all the hypothetical what-if talk about EB's hard-nosed coaching would correct mistakes this year for KC falls short, in my opinion, the look at KC dropping in almost every EPA category while the Commanders rose in basically every category is a more compelling case of Eric Bieniemy's absence, in my opinion. With all that being said, I think it's safe to say that EB leaving did affect the Chiefs' offense on some level, though to what exact level is hard to say, and that's mainly because Andy Reid runs the offense, can overrule play calls having 51% of the vote, and does indeed take over to call plays almost at random or in crucial situations, 2-minute drills, red zone, etc., and also has a pretty heavy input on the overall offensive game plan. Therefore, if the Chiefs were headed up by a defensive-minded head coach like Ron Rivera is in Washington, I think it would be a bit easier to conclude. But based on Andy Reid's very long history of success with 2 different franchises as a head coach over the last 20 years, and the Chiefs offense still being top 5 to top 10 in most categories this season, even with the changeup of multiple coaches on the offensive side of the ball, it speaks to the overall impact Andy Reid has in KC. So if the Chiefs can limit the turnovers, penalties, and dropped passes, I think we're looking at an offense that is closer to top 3 in the league, and the fire Nagy / the Chiefs miss EB very badly narrative wouldn't have as strong of a foothold. However, you can't deny the difference Bieniemy is making over there in Washington so far in multiple offensive categories despite the team's 4-6 record. And so I think both parties are having success of their own, with the Chiefs being the 1 seed at 7-2, although somewhat thanks to their defense a lot of the time, and the Commanders looking way better across the board on offense. And with that, I'll pass the question off to you guys. Do you think the Chiefs still really miss Eric Bieniemy, or do you think it's more of a minimal difference and the Chiefs can figure their problems out? Either way, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, let's freaking go. How about those